Welcome everyone to the Move the Stairs Friday chat. We're actually taping this a little bit early because Friday is the observed 4th of July holiday, but we're talking about some great stuff today, right?
Yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit more about brand protection. This is something that Diane and I talked about last week, what the physical tool is, how we score you. And you can go back and watch that video on our YouTube channel. But today, part of that is about digital listening too. And that's such an integral part of how we can look out for your company and your brand.
Well, and so what we're going to walk through is a really incredible example of how we used a series of digital tools, digital listening tools, to help a client navigate the shutdown of COVID-19. Their business was closed for a little over 3 months. So we used a set of tools to navigate that closure. We used another set of tools to help them reopen their business very thoughtfully and carefully. And then we used an additional set of tools to earn and analyze the extensive media coverage that they got upon reopening. So what we're talking about today is this suite of really incredibly powerful tools that we use to help businesses protect their brand, protect their business, protect their market share, and even not just protect, but grow and enhance what they're doing. So we're going to break this, as we do every week, we're going to break this conversation down into mini conversations. So talk us through what, each of the topics that we're going to be going through real quick.
Yeah, first of all, you and I are huge analytic nerds. So when we
True.
get to play with these tools, and I'm sure people who have watched these videos know that we just absolutely love the numbers. We are nerds. But yeah, first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk to you about how you can stay on top of things, especially when it's in a rapidly changing environment like COVID is. And, really quick before I move on to the next point, we started with COVID, went into closures, things are opening back up again, and now they're closing again. So it's really important to stay on top of those things. And we're going to do a deep dive into this, but I wanted to mention that right off the top. Next, we're going to walk through how you can use our digital newsroom, and how we use our digital newsroom creation tool to set up pre-written press releases. And they're pre-approved by clients too. So if we have to get those out quickly to get out in front of a problem, exactly, we have those set and ready to go, which is great.
Yeah.
Nextly, is that a word? We're going to cover.
It is today.
We'll talk about how we used social media management, our social media management tool, to maintain and strengthen and even grow our clients' relationships, not only with their guests, but also their employees and team members during that COVID closure.
So internal and external communication.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal, especially when you're closed for more than 3 months. It's a very big deal.
And media, communication with media. So we'll talk through how this social media communication or management tool helped manage all of these conversations and analyze these conversations as well.
And lastly, which I know is a word, we're going to round out our discussion today about our tool called Meltwater. And this is probably our flagship digital listening tool. And what that really helps us do is ensure that the COVID-19 safety messaging we're hearing out there is what our client wants us to have out there, and that people are interpreting the message in the way that they are needing it to be interpreted. And if it's not the case, then we help them adjust that message so that the right information gets out there.
So we're going to talk through all of those things. Now, just as a quick reminder, usually we're live on Fridays, and so we're encouraging people to interact and chat with us on Facebook. We're taping this a little bit ahead of time. So if you have questions, please do let us know. You can drop us an email. You can talk to us on social media. We'll answer you. If you have an idea for something that you're like, oh, I really wish they'd cover XYZ, you let us know and we'll cover XYZ. So even though we can't be interactive today, I still want you to feel free to get in contact with us and let us know how we can help you and what questions we can answer. The other thing that you should know, just another bit of housekeeping, is that there's a downloadable tool, the brand protection one sheet, which helps walk you through the steps that you would take to plan for a crisis event, to make sure that your brand is protected, and you've thought through the steps that you would take in case of a significant disruption and how you would protect that. So you can download that tool as well. But let's jump right into the first topic, which is what we call insider media relations. So you hear us talk about this all the time, and the use of social media and this social media tool to stay on top of the changing environment. We use this in a couple of different ways.
Yeah, no kidding. So the first one being, as COVID is shutting things down,
So
and
this
my
is 3 months
gosh,
ago,
it seems like 3 years
a
ago.
million years ago.
Yeah, no kidding. But we're using social media to stay on top of what is local government saying, what is state government saying, and why is that important to our client, and how may it be important to our client. And for us, that may seem like doing its due diligence, but as former journalists, we know oftentimes ahead of time what that dignitary may be speaking about. And that will, save us a little bit of time when we're trying to parse out what's important, what's not important, how it may impact our client.
Well, and there was different information coming from the county level and the state
Exactly.
level. So it was incumbent upon us to know when those press conferences were. And
Mhm.
one of the things that we are doing is we're on social media all day long. So as soon as there was an announcement that the governor was going to have a press conference, we knew when it was, what he was going to be talking about, we knew where to watch it, and then we knew who was going to be covering that press conference to analyze everything or provide additional context around it. So we use social media, keep it's open on our desks all the time to just know what's going on. So there was a tremendous amount right in that March timeframe where we were using social media just to try to stay on top of the fire hose of information that was coming down the pike. So that was really important, and it was right at about that time that we started to think about, and we'll get into this in the third topic, but how to use then social media to not just stay on top of information coming in, but look at information going out. But talk really briefly about this social media listing tool that we use, because it's really powerful, and we're going to talk about it again, but it helps us in a multitude of different ways.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that really quick, but if you don't have access to a paid listening tool, Twitter lists are going to be your best friend.
Oh, man.
I wanted to touch on that first, Eric, because I think that's really important, because during his press conferences, we had our lists open. We knew which journalists were tweeting,
Yep.
and we knew which ones were always covering those press conferences. So it was almost like a good security blanket to have. So we could look at their tweets knowing that they're reliable sources of information, just in case there may have been something that we missed, because, in the stay at home, in my case, the dogs may have gotten into something. And in your
And I have
case,
kids
the
running
kids may have been
around,
up to
as we all
something, right?
do.
And
Yeah.
you were homeschooling at that point in time too. So it's good to kind of have those as security blankets. But as far as the tool that we like to use, now, which do we want to go, a Sprout here or Meltwater? Because we use both of them for listening to social media.
Yeah. So maybe very quickly explain the difference between the two tools. And I think that might help people understand how we use them.
That's probably a good idea. So Sprout is going to be, imagine when you schedule a Facebook post, or now more recently a Twitter post. So what Sprout allows us to do is bulk upload tweets as well as Facebook posts for our clients. But in addition to that, any type of engagement that our clients would get, whether it's a Facebook message or a Twitter message or a comment or a retweet or a quote tweet, we would see all of that, and it conveniently kind of puts it all in one little bucket for
Comes down
us.
in one dashboard. So you're not going from like Facebook to Twitter to Instagram and back here, and which one, where did I see it? I can't know. It's all in one dashboard. You can see it in one place.
And on the other hand, we get to use Meltwater, and we can actually, search hashtags. And I think what's really important about that is we can actually track the sentiment of hashtags being used. So if there was a hashtag that came out that was, positive or negative for a client, we could follow that and be on top of it, as we should be.
Yeah. But I think to your point a minute ago, there are a number of free tools that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't collate it quite as much as some of these paid tools, but like you said, Twitter lists. So for example, with this particular client, we know all of the journalists who cover this client. So
Mm-hmm.
we can create a Twitter list just of those journalists that we know that we've had contact with before, that we know will be covering this client, will be covering those press conferences. So we're not just looking at like all Denver journalists or all, this particular industry journalists. We're looking at the ones who actually cover that client, and we know exactly what they're saying. Free. You can do that. You can set up Twitter lists. If you don't know how to do Twitter lists, Google it. They're an amazing time-saving tool. The other free tool you can use is Google Alerts. I tell people to be a little bit careful because sometimes they will come in instantly when something hits with your search term on it. Sometimes it'll take 24 hours. So the tools that we have give us instant alerts. We get them on our phone. You can set them up on your computer. Like, man, we know about it. But you can use free tools to keep tabs on this, what's happening in the sort of digital landscape, without outlaying a bunch of money, for some of these very robust tools.
So just to recap, COVID is now starting to close things down. We're listening intently to every press conference that's happening at the state and county levels, and in some case city levels, so that we can be on top of all the relevant information that we have for our clients. And now we're deep diving into our tools to make sure that the things that we are hearing out on press conferences are in fact what is occurring. Because, when you have that fire hose of information, oftentimes you may get conflicting reports. It's almost like a breaking news scenario at times. So we have to make sure that we're using these tools to ensure every piece of information that we are getting is in fact true, and partition how it may be relevant to our clients.
Sure. Well, and the other thing this allowed, at that moment allowed us to do, was to take the weight of keeping track of all this stuff off of our client, because at that point the client was having to furlough team members. And so they were working almost exclusively on how do we meet state recommendations for closure, and then furlough our team members and still make sure that they had health care and they were being taken care of as best they could. So it allowed the client to know that the sort of external stuff was being monitored, that they would know if there was a problem, they would know if there was something that needed to be taken care of, but they were able to take care of their team members, which was really, really a critical element of internal communications with their own team members at the time. So we've got a picture of, here are all the tools that we used as all of this chaos is happening and the shutdown's happening, and we know what's being said and who's saying it, and we're tracking it and we're following it, and like we got that cadence. And then we moved into, okay, now how do we control the message? And this is where we have another just incredible tool that we use, that was helped us walk through some planning. And we talk about this all the time in brand protection and insider media relations, planning for how do you control the message. And I want you to talk through Presley, because it's just the most amazing tool.
Yeah, I really like Presley. I think a good example from this is when we had, way back, maybe not during the closures, but post closures, when we had something pop up and we worked on a press release over the weekend. And as soon as we got the green light from that client to issue a press release, I mean, it was 2 minutes. I had everything preloaded and ready to go. So that's the advantage of Presley. And, what we could do is, in order to, control messaging and make sure that what we want to put out there on behalf of a client is readily available, one click of a button, we can issue and write these approved dark releases. And it's kind of an inside baseball term. So
explain
before
that.
I deep dive into Presley, a dark release would be a press release that we brainstorm on behalf of a client, something that may pop up. With COVID-19, I think anybody would, at least have a statement prepared that if their business was being forced to close because of COVID-19, or if they had team members or staff, employees test positive for COVID-19, all things that are kind of at the forefront of your mind, you've got those drawn up already. So that in the event that happens, you can, with one click of a button, have that press release that you've already preloaded into Presley, ready to be sent off to the journalists that are covering your client, because you followed them using those tools. I know it's a little confusing.
I
It's a
know.
lot.
Well, I know. So I just wanted, for anybody who hasn't seen what these digital newsrooms look like, it's
Hmm.
so this tool creates a digital newsroom. So it lives online. All of your press releases live there. You can load up photos. You can, load up all this information and background, so the media can get at it anytime. But it also creates a digital release. Now you can publish them dark, which is what we're saying. So these were living digitally, but not pushed out yet, not visible to anyone except for us on the back end.
Right.
And we were able to put together some press releases about, here's what we're doing to make you as safe as possible in this location because of COVID. Here are the safety precautions that we're taking. Here are the the actions that we're taking to help our team members. Here's what we're doing to make this a better situation. And so all of this information was loaded up in basically unpublished or draft form. And then when we knew that we had to respond to something or drop a release, it was very easy to update that, modify it, add in. Now, this is the really cool thing about Presley. You can add in photos, you can add in video links, you can even add in social links. So had there been something really wonderful that we wanted to share from the social feeds, you can drop in those social feeds. And when journalists get this in their inbox, it's not another sort of black and white email, and it's definitely not an email with an attachment that we know they won't click on.
Hmm.
So it drops in with photos, with video. It's customized to each member of the media. It has exactly what they need. So we know that folks with radio are going to use sound. So we customize it for what they need. We know that all of the TV folks are going to need video, and they're going to need it in a different format. So, we're able to customize and send out the content that the media need most, and we can use that language for media so that they know that we're providing great content, great information, and they can trust what we're doing. And that's really what we mean by insider media relations. You and I are former journalists, as is Diane, and that's what we're doing. That's experience in insider media relations that we're putting to use when we're outreaching to our colleagues in the media.
And 95% of the time, you're not going to issue those releases.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that peace of mind that those are ready to go, especially when you have to get a message out and you're thinking ahead and you have that message pre-planned and you have the photos loaded up and you have any B-roll. B-roll is just video to send along with it. That, with us, it's one click of a button and it's out. And,
Right.
you're protected. And that, again, falls under the umbrella of brand protection. And that's, something we're always thinking about here, trying to be 2 steps ahead of anything that may be out there to harm your business or your brand.
And that's such a good point, because right after the business that we were working with closed,
Mm-hmm.
like when things sort of calmed down just a little bit, and now we're sitting around going, okay, how long is this going to take?
Right.
Well, that's when we kicked into gear and we walked through, what kind of dark releases are you going to need? What
Mm-hmm.
kinds of information do we need to have at our fingertips? What approval process does it need to go through? Because it did get more extensive than our regular press releases on behalf of this client because of various reasons. So we had that, when you have that moment to breathe, that's the moment to get to work. That's really the root of brand protection is, once you get done with that initial shock, use that time that you've got to start planning ahead and making sure my ducks are in a row.
And that's, all part of the plan that we worked with this particular client to roll out. So in addition to the press releases, there was this kind of void that was going to be left empty, which was social media at the time. And we all know how very important social media and how great of a tool it can be to get messaging out there, whether you are a business like M&C Communications, or you're another business who welcomes guests and customers into their space. And if you just disappear for 3 months at a time,
Right.
It really diminishes your brand, which you may have worked years to build.
And that was exactly the case. And I think that it's an important thing to think about here, that, you know, most of us are thinking about social media when we think about the rah-rah, you know, like, hey, I
Yeah.
want to show this new thing, or here's this fun, goofy, you know, event, or, you know, here's team members doing something cool. Like, we always think about it in terms of how would you showcase something positive. This was a case where we jumped in to help this client use their social media channels that they had developed and built over a number of years and had done a great job. And we started to help them use these tools to manage their message when things were not going well, not because of the client, but because of this mandated shutdown. And so we used it for not only external communications, which is how we all think of social media, it's going out to the world. We used it for media relations, and we used it for internal communications. I want you to talk about how you did that.
Yeah, so here's the thing about furlough. If you're on furlough, technically you're not supposed to be speaking to your place of employment.
Right.
It's just how the labor laws work. So Facebook was a really great kind of intermediary tool through us to pass along that critical internal communications in real time. Because, what did we do when we were sitting home during the closures? We were on
We're all on our
Facebook
phones. Yeah.
all the time. So it was a great medium to use to pass along some of that critical information, especially as we got closer to the reopening. But even prior to that, just checking in. Hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And let me tell you, moderating that group, it was incredible to see the camaraderie
Yeah.
that some of that staff had. That was really inspiring. And as much divisiveness as we happen to see on social media in 2020, when you get down to the root of it and you get into some of the smaller, more granular groups like that, it's really people helping one another and lifting one another up. And let me tell you, from personally, that was really cool being a part of that.
Yeah. And we should be really clear. We were not passing along HR information.
Correct.
We were not passing along reopening information. This was not a conduit of business communication. This was a conduit of community. This was putting together a group to say, we all work together and we're all in this together, as we've been hearing. And, so you set up theme days. So it was like, hey, what are you cooking? And, show me your critters, your dogs and your cats, and how you doing? And so you did a theme, for every day, to just help people have something to look forward to stay connected with their team members, to feel like they were part of their work community, even though they weren't there.
Right. I mean, you get into a position, a career, and you work with people for a number of years, and all of a sudden you don't see them, and you realize that, they're not just coworkers, they're friends, and they're good friends at that, because you see them every day. And in some cases, you see them more times out of the week than you may see your significant other or your spouse. So when you move away from that, it can have kind of a detrimental psychological effect. So it was nice to act as that conduit to help bring these people back together in a positive environment. That was really neat.
Sure.
And that was just internally.
That was internal. Now talk about, because you make such a good point, and we talk about this all the time, consistency. And I don't know if people really, it's a really simple concept, but it is not simple in execution. And especially when there's disruption to the extent that we had, and you were responsible for maintaining the consistency of posting across 3 of their platforms, social media platforms, for 3 months while they were closed down. How do you fill 3 months of social media content when literally nothing is happening?
Well, we're going back to before the shutdown. When everything closed, we were mindful of this. And, credit to Diane, I remember her saying, things are going to close and it's going to be at a rapid pace. And I remember hearing this from her and just, no, you're crazy. There's no way this is going to happen. You know why? Because that's nothing we've ever seen before.
Right.
It's nothing I've ever seen before in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And she was ahead of it. And she
Yeah.
said, this is going to happen. What can we do to prepare you for that? And, obviously we sprung into action, and we worked with this client to come up with a plan to say, okay, if a closure is put into place, we have to keep the cadence going on social media, because this is going to be a good opportunity to not only separate your brand, but also let people know that, hey, you're still there for them. Because if things close, they may be looking to you for that little piece of joy that they may have in an
Right.
otherwise really difficult time.
Jordan, we've talked about theme, creating a theme in a content map. And again, we're a little bit inside baseball. So help walk us through what's a content map and what kind of themes are we talking?
Sarah, content map would be literally just imagine a little desk calendar that you have. And each day of the week, you would have a theme across all the weeks of that particular month. So what we did with this particular client is every day got a theme. And every day we put out some sort of pre-produced picture or video or interview or something along those lines, so that we're engaging people, because everyone during the closures, even us included, and thankfully we didn't have to be furloughed, very thankful for that, but your lives are still turned upside down. So people who may have gone to this particular client's social media channels for that one little piece of joy, in a normal time, would still see that they have a constant cadence and a constant voice during the shutdowns. And, to have that is pretty important. Where a lot of businesses didn't, this particular client did.
Well, and I was going to say, so, that old saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. Is that Rahm Emanuel, I think? But so in this case, this client is one of, a dozen in the same industry. And, very few other similar businesses in that industry maintain social media during closure. So, what happens is, if you are there every day, if I see, this business crop up in my feed every single morning when I roll over and I grab my phone and I flip it on to Facebook and I say, who's there? And boom, there's the same business every single day. And I'm like, oh yeah, there they are again. And that's what happened in this case. The silence from the other similar businesses in the same industry allowed the opportunity for this client to, sort of rise to the level of being noticed, because they were there, and they were there consistently every single day for 3 months, with positive, upbeat, interesting, funny, supportive social media content on 3 different channels. So anywhere that you were flipping around on social media, you ran into this client's message.
And I think what's important to note here is you brought up a good point, where this particular client had a very steady voice throughout the entire closure period, and we could measure that. And we use Sprout to measure that. And some of the numbers, the social media analytics that we get pulled from Sprout for that entire period were just mind blowing. And I think a lot of that, Sarah, had to do because they may have been, at least for a good chunk of that time, the only voice that was occupying that particular space. You may have had other people that would usually frequent competitor social media channels come over to their social media channels, right, to see what was going on, right, because they had this constant voice going out there. And that really, at least percentage wise, compared to what was occurring during that 3-month period where they were closed prior to that, was astronomical. Like, you would think that the numbers would go down. The numbers were through the roof.
No, they were eye-popping numbers. And that's another benefit of one of these tools. And Sprout Social is, it's not an inexpensive tool, but man, the depth of data, and you can see what fires people up on social media. You can see what they respond to. You can see how they respond. You can respond back to them. So it's a really powerful, flexible tool that we use to be able to drive that engagement and measure that engagement. Now, the other thing that we did, and this is kind of with that dashboard, is, all of this social media content created an opportunity to continuously engage with our media partners. So again, this list, like I said, that list of journalists that we know would cover it, they're not going to engage um, often, but they're going to notice. And so we would get little pings from them like, oh, hey, what's going on up there? Do you have any data on when you might reopen, or what's happening, or, how is this affecting your business or whatever? And so we'd get these little, every now and again, little pings from media. And we were able to use Sprout to know when you get a ping from media, because when you get a ping from media, you need to respond quickly.
Yes.
Like they're on social media almost 24/7. And so, if you don't respond, you are missing an opportunity to rise to the level of attention of a potential media colleague.
And I think what's neat too is during that time period, as there's a consistent amount of social media posts still going out where nobody else is,
right?
Every now and again, they're going to like your post, they're going to comment on your post. In an environment where everyone was trying to lift everyone else up, it was a great opportunity for this client to occupy that space and say, hey, we're doing our part too.
Yeah.
Because we may be closed, but we're still thinking about people who would come and see us. We're still thinking about the people who work for us. And I think that was really important. And how we worked with them to get that steady cadence out really did help get that message across.
Right. So far in this discussion, we have talked about using our insider media relations experience and the use of social media. So we use Sprout Social on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to stay on top of this changing environment. We have talked about how we used our digital newsroom creation tools, Presley, to make sure that we were ready to go with dark messages, messages that were pre-written, pre-approved, had most of the information that we knew we were going to have to send out at some point, that just needed to be quickly updated and then sent and delivered to our media colleagues with the materials that they needed, whether it was sound for radio, B-roll for TV, video, or still photos for our newspaper print partners. So we've also talked about Meltwater. So how we use this incredibly powerful tool in combination with Sprout to just keep track of what was going on and then measure using social media how we communicate with internal partners, external partners, media partners. So we've kind of talked about all of the tools, and Meltwater is really this crown jewel of brand protection. And it's sort of hard to explain until you see it, but when you do see it, it's just like, wowza. But it's a really powerful digital listening tool. Now I want you to explain how you put that to work to measure media coverage, report on media coverage, and analyze media coverage.
Oh man, I don't know if we have enough time for this.
Oh, sure we do.
Be like
Bada bing, knock it out.
A dissertation right here. But the crux of Meltwater is, we use it to set up a dashboard for every client. And what we can do is we can search particular words that may pop up either in a online news articles, in broadcast, that includes radio and television, so that in real time we can measure what type of message is being discussed about our clients. And we'll use Meltwater not only to kind of test the water temperature, so to speak, to see what's being talked about, but also to measure how our clients are being talked about. And I want to point this out too. Meltwater is not a tool to try to shield you from negativity, because one of the things that we like to do with our clients is establish them as thought leaders in the space. And anytime that we can do that, we want to be able to report back to the client and say, hey, so-and-so ran this story about you. This is what they said. There's some really great things here. And so we can kind of use it to do both crisis and thought leadership.
Well, and it's the kind of thing where you can set your search terms so you can kind of keep ahead of some potential trouble spots. So you can say client name. And then if I see this search term that could be problematic, like client name COVID, well, I need to know what's being said about client name COVID.
Exactly.
It could be just about anything, but this is a serious brand protection tool where you can say, if I see momentum behind these search terms, I know there's something that I had better pay attention to and check into and see, is this inaccurate media coverage? Is it somebody in the media we haven't talked to before? Is it a storm brewing on social media that we need
Mhm.
to maybe potentially jump into or see if we can activate some of our advocates? So Meltwater looks at this over the entire media landscape, like you said, TV, radio, print, online, social media, all the channels of social media. So if you have an idea of, again, from brand protection planning, here are the things that I think are, would be a potential trouble spot for me. You can set up a search term to know if potential trouble spot is coming on the horizon, and you can do something about it before it turns into a major issue.
And not surprisingly, as we, navigated the waters of the closures and the uncertainties leading to reopening, COVID-19 was always at the forefront of, if this client is going to be mentioned, COVID-19 is probably going to be mentioned as well. So, what are the things that are being discussed about COVID-19 and potentially other businesses occupying that space? And how can we craft our message for this particular client so that when they are mentioned in the same conversation of COVID-19, it's not a negative conversation, but a positive conversation. And this particular client, we were able to work through that so that the messaging we were putting out there was, how are we responding to COVID-19? Earlier, you pointed out, what are we doing to keep guests safe, and what are we doing to keep our
Team members
staff and team members safe? Exactly. So it's these types of things that you can be on the lookout for, so they can almost help you craft your message to get out what you want to be occupying that space, especially as your name's being mentioned.
Well, and then the coolest thing, or one of the coolest things about Meltwater, because there's a number, is when we were done with this wonderful grand reopening that they had a few weeks ago, it was click to deliver a report saying, here's everywhere that you were mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
every time you were mentioned. Here are the impressions, the number of people who, were exposed to your message. Here is share of voice in comparison to other similar businesses. So, we can parse this out, and it's, clickety click, and they've got just a really, really, really nice report to be able to look at. And it helps the client feel really good about their ROI on brand protection and public relations and the services that, that we're really working for them. And it makes them feel like we're as much a part of their team, as their team members.
And that's something that we always strive for, because a number of our clients, Sarah, you would know more than me because you've been with the company a lot longer than me, but we have really great relationships with them.
Yeah.
And Diane will tell you too that when you sign us on to work with you, it's a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And we really care about what we're doing. And as long as it's in the best interest of you and us, and we can reciprocate that relationship, we're going to do really great things. And, this particular example, I remember after the grand reopening, you and I having a conversation, Sarah, and I was like, wow. It was a crazy couple of days, but
Yeah.
we got so much done for these guys. And, even though we were tired and hungry and thirsty and all of these things, woe is me, right?
Right.
There's a sense of pride in everything that we did. And it
Well, there was a
great
sense
to be
of
a part of.
pride in reporting those numbers. Do you remember what those were? Do you have those? Like, these were, so we had, because I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to dig those up. We
Okay.
had eye-wateringly big numbers in social media. So, followers gained, impressions, reach, engagement, all of these, factors that we really like to see when we're working on social media. So we were able to quantify all of that and provide just an eye-popping report on social media. And then building on all of that, and all of the work that this client did and that we did on behalf of this client, leading up to this reopen. Good golly, the numbers that as Diane said, because it was a rather small geographic area, she's like, you wouldn't think there was anybody but this client.
Yeah, no kidding.
In that geographic area. There were like a dozen other similar businesses, but that client was almost the only one mentioned.
Yeah, no kidding. So across social media, all the posts, at least all together, leading up to reopening, it was 410,000 impressions, which is pretty mind-blowing, and 42,000 engagements. That's also pretty staggering. And reopening day alone, between all of the outlets that we worked with this client to get up there and welcome them into this space, 15.5 million digital impressions.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. And close to 1 million broadcast impressions. It was 750,000 broadcast impressions. So
on a Wednesday, in the middle of the week.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
how many hits do you have right in front of you? How many hits? How many total?
Not off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me, but it was 40 and change.
Good golly, 40 mentions in media. Not bad.
Not bad. Yeah, not bad for a day's work.
Not bad.
Actually, it was a lot of days' work.
That was a lot. Yeah, that was a number of days.
3+ months work.
Right.
But,
go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just to finish my thought, when you see that and when we see that, it's just a great sense of everything that we have worked toward to help this client has paid off. And that, when you're working with us, it's a genuine feeling of, we did it and we're going to keep doing it and we're going to do it better next time. I don't know how we're going to do it better next time, but we're going to do it better next time. And that's the reciprocating relationship we have with our clients. And I think, through our brand protection tool and how we look at things through the lens of being former journalists, it really, sets us apart when we're working with clients and working to meet their needs and goals.
Right. So to recap this special Friday, the July 3rd, Independence Day, here's what we ought to do, Jordan. This is independence from worrying about your business. Right?
I see what you did there.
Thank you. Thank you. That was some of my best work. But, to get started on brand protection, what I want you to do is download the brand protection tool one sheet. And that's going to get you started thinking about, what is likely to affect my business? What is maybe less likely but more disruptive? Because that's what we're talking about here. Nobody in the world would have said in January, hey, I'll bet we ought to plan for a complete 3-month shutdown of our business. And yet here we are.
Right.
So the brand protection tool one sheet is going to help you get started thinking through what are the most likely things that I need to plan for, and what are those like kind of out there, but you know what, boy, I better have a plan for that. Building burns down, I don't know what it might be for your business, but those weird things that keep you up at night. That's what's going to help get you started there. So we have talked about our friends Sprout Social. We've talked about our friends Presley, and we have talked about our friends Meltwater. So these are these incredible, really, really powerful tools that we love to use, that we have fully integrated into our insider media relations and brand protection process, crisis planning process. And so do you have questions? Does anybody have questions? Do you wonder?
I do not have questions.
You don't have a question, but somebody's got a question. So we want to hear it. I want you to drop us a note in social media, send us an email, and then let us know if there are other topics that you would like us to take on a Friday when we're feeling very honest and straightforward and punchy. And we would love to talk about it. But do you think we've moved the stairs, Jordan?
I think we moved the stairs and then some for this client during this time period, and that's what we do at M&C. We move the stairs. If I think in layman's terms, if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade,
Right?
right? Well, with us, we move the stairs, and you can watch that video also on our blog and our YouTube channel. Maybe you're watching this video on our YouTube channel now. You can go back and watch that, where Diane tells a pretty compelling story about why moving the stairs and that simple action of moving the stairs helped her in a situation years ago and has evolved into the mantra for our company.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July, everyone. We hope you have a great weekend, and feel free to drop us a line. Take care.